Hello and a very warm welcome to everybody in today's class. The debt ceiling issue is raising tensions between the current President of the United States and the Congress. The US Treasury State Department is running dry when it comes to its coffers. It has nothing left. And 1st June is the X date when the Treasury Department could default its debt. It's not a pretty picture that I'm painting, I know, but from the examination perspective, we have to know all about debt ceiling. The introduction to the current scenario. What has been the status of raising the debt ceiling since the past many years? Is the crisis something new? How severe and profound would be the impacts of defaulting of debts by the US government on the Indian market as well as the global market? What is the 14th amendment that the US president can invoke in order to ease the debt ceiling? We are going to discuss all that. Any government in the world needs two things: to spend and to earn. In order to spend, it needs revenue so that it can easily do certain programs which are for the development of the economy. Before 1917, the Treasury State Department of the USA had a lot of autonomy when it comes to raising money for spending and doing the welfare of the people in terms of education, infrastructure, medical expenses. But in 1917, the Congress thought that we should have certain control over the president, over the US government, so that we can influence the policies. This was but natural. So in 1917, the Congress assured that it declares a debt ceiling limit. Debt ceiling is nothing but the ceiling that has been standardized according to the US Congress, beyond which the US government cannot take loans. This is what debt ceiling is in layman's term. In January 2023, the debt as well as the debt ceiling both stood at $31.4 trillion. And the United States debt nearly tripled since 2009. The debts are increasing. The revenue, on the other hand, is not matching it enough. So the Treasury Department's ability to borrow money in order to make payments on that debt has repeatedly run into issues with the Congress. Because if I am having a lot of loan on myself, now in order to pay the previous loan, I might again want to take a loan. And that has caused a lot of problems between the Treasury Department of the US government and the Congress. The most contentious debate is, do we need the debt ceiling or not? Should we raise the debt ceiling or abolish the ceiling all at once? And there have been negotiations on altering the limit in order to try to focus spending cuts. There has been a condition. Okay, the Congress says, all right, we will increase the debt ceiling, but you have to cut your spending. And this is what is not sitting well with the current government. So the government shutdowns and the specter of default has already threatened to push the US government into an abyss, and it could have catastrophic consequences if the Treasury Department can no longer pay the nation's debts. How? We will discuss that as well. See, the US government has run a deficit which averages $1 trillion every year since 2001. And government is spending more, but the revenue it has is not matching. So when there is a gap, it tries to fund that deficit. In order to fund that deficit, it raises loans from the public. This is a very easy way to go, but if the government only is getting its hands all over the market, if it is the one that is getting all the loans, where will the public go? They will get loans at a higher rate. They will get loans at a rate which is exorbitant, and hence the development and the saving could go on a low. This is what the entire scenario is. So they borrow, the Treasury Department borrows to continue to finance the payments. The Congress has already authorized, and any change to the debt ceiling requires majority approval of both the houses of the Congress. So this is the influence that the Congress also is putting over the current government. See, How often has the debt ceiling been raised? This is one of the questions we need an answer for, because if we do not know the past, we cannot relate it with the present. See, when does it become necessary to raise the debt ceiling? Whenever the government needs to borrow money to pay its debts. Of course, it cannot be seen as a defaulter. If it will default on its loans, it will not pay back the banks what it has taken, or it cannot pay back the publics what it has taken. So what will happen? The economy will start collapsing. The circulation of money will get an issue with, and that is why the economy will start collapsing. And what has been the frequency of raising the debt ceiling in the past? Raising the ceiling has been a relatively routine procedure for Congress. But in the last few years, because of political polarization, this is becoming a contentious issue. Congress has acted generally quickly. Right now, we are seeing that the X date is coming. Few days are left when the Treasury Department can say we cannot pay our debts. Why? Because the Congress is not raising the debt ceiling. If the Congress is not raising the debt ceiling, I cannot take loans in order to pay my previous loans. So this is what is happening. It's a cyclical structure. So Congress generally has acted quickly. Since 1960, Congress has increased the ceiling 78 times, and most recently happened in 2021. And 49 of these increases were implemented under Republican presidents, and 29 were under Democratic presidents. Alright, so these small facets are not very important from the perspective of prelims, but you can understand which government was doing how much. Democratic government we have right now in USA, and Republican was when there was the time of Donald Trump. So how we can compare them? We have given an idea to you over here. How powerful is the Congress with respect to debt ceiling? It can suspend the debt ceiling, or it can also temporarily allow the Treasury to supersede the debt limit. For a temporary time, it can say to the Treasury Department, okay, you can breach this limit. But this is for a temporary period of time. You have to pay it back as soon as possible. Then the president, when we talk about President Barack Obama, as I have already told you, that there have been instances of certain such kind of issues back then as well. This crisis is not something new. So President Barack Obama and congressional republics, they locked a lot of horns with respect to debt ceiling. And the problem was to raise the ceiling just 2 days before the default of the loan. Just coming to a short of not having enough money to pay your loans, or just coming short of repaying your loans or breaching the debt limit, also caused a lot of issues for the government. The US stocks since the 2008 financial crisis has seen that these sort of debt ceiling issues have come to the fore more often. Standard & Poor global rating, it downgraded the United States credit worthiness for the first and only time back then. And this is a credit rating agency. If it is not providing good rating to the US government, it can wreak havoc for the entire economy, because most of the economy is reserving its stock of money in dollars. Dollar is trustworthy. Trade in the world happens in dollars. So if dollars, this particular currency, is not trustworthy, then it can make the collapse of the entire economy. Also, the government's accountability office, which is an auditor there, increased US borrowing costs by $1.3 billion that year alone. So just imagine that kind of situation back then. Just mix the entire recipe to the current situation, when oil and energy prices are already high because of Russian-Ukraine war, trade issues that USA had with China since 2017, that is also causing another problem. COVID-19 supply chains are getting back on track. This is another problem. So all this has led to borrowing more by the Treasury Department and spending even more, because now they will getting energy at higher prices. So all this has led to the current situation. And you see the US debt ceiling limit is about to get breached. It's very dangerous. Until and unless this is suspended for a temporary period of time, but the US government and the Congress are not agreeing on many points. So they need to ensure that they soon agree. Otherwise, the markets are already falling down. The US political polarization is deepening since the last decades, and the Congress wants to have more and more influence in the policy and other reforms, and not just give the government a free hand on spending money. This is one of the reasons where we are seeing such kind of problems to arise. Now, congressional budget hawks right now, they're increasingly demanding that you need to cut the spending. It is important. Like, understand it from an example. You have a child or any person that you have given a credit card to. The person is constantly breaching the limit. What will you do? You will increase the limit every time, or you will sit with that person and ask them what is wrong? Why are you breaching this limit all the time? And what can we do to correct it? So this is what the budget hawks are trying to do. And President Biden has said that he will settle nothing for nothing less than a no strings attached increase. What does this mean? It means that there was a bill that was passed in April 2023 which said that we are going to raise the debt ceiling limit, but you will have to cut the spending limit. You have to cut the spending, then only we can talk about raising the debt ceiling. So this is not what the Joe Biden government wants. And what the entire issue revolves around: deepening political polarization. And the limit, as in the spending limit that the Congress asked the Joe Biden government, was to cut by 14%. That was a lot for over the next decade. So the government is actually not in a position, because it wants to ensure that the economy is going up and not coming down or not staying stagnant. And this is where the US economy is falling right now. It is becoming stagnant in nature. Analysts have said that the bill has no chance of passing the Democrats-led Senate, because Republicans want something else and Democrats want something else. Now, the next point over here is, of course, the breaching thing. If the debt ceiling is breached, what will happen? This could cause or herald a chaos for the US and global economies, because hitting the debt ceiling would hamstring the government's ability to finance its operations. The government will have nothing to give back to the public, as in no infrastructure development, no education, no security when it comes to pension as well. And the national defense or funding entitlements such as Medicare and Social Security could also be impacted. Why? National defense is the most important thing that the US has on its mind right now. And a downgrade by a credit rating agency will impact the sentiments of the investors in the US dollar. Weakening of the US dollar is nothing but chaos and chaos. It would also increase the borrowing cost for businesses and homeowners alike. Why? Because the money that was given to the government, it is not giving back to the banks or the public. So the public or the banks will come at loggerheads. The public wants its money, or the public wants the money or a loan at a proper rate. But the banks have no money right now. Why? Because the government took most of it and it's not paying the banks back. So the interest rates will get up. They will go higher. And when they will go higher, there will be a problem with paying your mortgage. There will be a problem with paying for education, paying for your home's real estate. So all this is interconnected. Even businesses will be impacted. Goldman Sachs economists, they have estimated that a breach of the debt ceiling would immediately halt about 1/10 of the US economic activity. Third Way is a center-left think tank over there. It has said that a breach that leads to default could cause the loss of 3 million jobs as well, and add $130,000 to the cost of an average 30-year mortgage, and raise the interest rates enough to increase national debt by 850. Now, this is another problem, that if you are not paying back your loans, the government is not doing that, it will increase the mortgage as well. As I have already told you that the loan amounts will be given at a higher rate to the homeowners and the public. So if they are not getting enough loans to pay back their previous loans, it could lead to another issue. Now, higher interest rates also could divert future taxpayer money away from much needed federal investment. They might not want to invest in such projects which are not giving them back proper interest. So infrastructure development would also come to an halt. Education and healthcare are something that they are also worried about. Now, the creditworthiness of the US Treasury securities is, of course, because of the strength of the US dollar. If US dollars, the sentiments in this particular currency would go down, it could lead to investors to sell US Treasury bonds and thus weaken the dollar. That will be, if they are going to sell the dollars, that will be too much dollar in the market. Too much dollar in the market means the value of the currency will come down. That is why US is hard cash, because it is scarce in nature. If it will become plenty in nature, the value will come down, and over half of the world's foreign currency reserves are held in the US dollar. This could lead to heavily indebted low-income countries that are already struggling to pay their debt. On their sovereign debts, a weaker dollar could make debts denominated in other currency relatively more expensive. And every country right now, the developing country, almost they are having their reserves in dollars. They're paying back in dollars. So if the value of the dollar gets hurt, their own loans basically, which are denominated in dollars, as compared to their currency, the value of it will also be impacted. So this will become an issue even for the rupee as well. Now the US exporters could have a blast. How? When the value of the dollar comes down, so does the value of the goods they are holding for exports. When value of the goods come down, people all over the world could demand more for them. So exports might increase, but in order to match the demand, the supply has to increase. To increase the supply, they again will go to the banks to get loans, but then they will be given loans at a higher interest rate. So it's all connected. And this could benefit aspiring great power rivals such as China. China already wants to ensure that its currency, renminbi, becomes a super currency, and people, the world starts reserving their foreign amounts in that. But still, it's not matching the dollar, the trustworthiness of the dollar. So it's important that we ensure dollar is intact. The Indian market can face a downturn in case this happens due to many Indian businesses with exposure to the United States can face troubles in their operations because they are operating in the USA. For them also, loan might become an issue. Moving ahead, Treasury can stave off right now a default for several months. This is one of the chances that the Treasury has, even if the debt limit doesn't rise, debt ceiling doesn't rise. It is known as extraordinary measures, such as they could suspend payments to government employees saving program. They could underinvest in certain government funds and delaying auctions of securities. Although this would cause a problem. It happened in 2011 and 13. Alright, so if it is asked in your examination, you can write that. Federal spending would have to plummet or taxes would have to rise significantly. Now the government is actually having a two-edged sword. The government might not spend much, also it has to raise its revenue through taxes, or both, either or both can also happen at the same time. Now, despite the cushion of the extraordinary measure, long impasse over the debt ceiling can be enough to shake investor sentiment in the dollar. If the Congress and the current government do not come to an agreement, that could create a picture in the global scenario of the US that it is unable to lead on its economy in the right track, So this becomes a problem. Another thing is that invoking of Amendment 14. And under that, Section 4 is important. See, it is actually related with myriad citizens' rights, such as equal protection of laws. So the amendment came a lot in the news with respect to Brown versus Board of Education, Roe versus Wade, Bush versus Gore, and more. And a clause in the 17th Amendment, it says that validity of the public debt authorized by law shall not be questioned. It could apply to debt limit. So a legislation could be passed for spending the amount, and that cannot be questioned if the 14th Amendment is invoked. Now, another thing is that if we talk about the Section 4 of the 14th Amendment, it allows the Treasury Department to keep borrowing money past the debt limit, and it would be unconstitutional for the US to fail to make payments according to this section. If it is not paying back its loans, then it would be unconstitutional, and to help that we have Section 4. But it won't be invoked. Why? Because the current government will not risk the reputation it has with the Congress. It's not going to make its elections so hard for the next year. So this is also very unlikely. It might not happen. The thing is that, do other countries also have similar policies? Yes, Denmark has and Poland also has. In 2021, Denmark's central government debt was about 14% of its ceiling. That means if you have a certain GDP, you can spend 14% of it. Australia introduced a debt limit in 2007 with the goal of legislatively mandating fiscal responsibility amid large budget deficits. If there is a deficit, large deficit, Australia wanted the government to be accountable for it. So it introduced the debt limit in 2007, and Poland's constitution, it caps the spending at 60% of GDP, but it doesn't limit any sort of borrowing. Alright, so I hope all this is understood by you. Should the debt ceiling be revoked? Let's talk about that. Should it be completely revoked? See, legislative consent says that the debt limit affords Congress some oversight authority and engenders fiscal accountability. Simply, it means that there are two parties in the Congress, supposedly. One is authorized to spend money. Another one wants to be the authority when it comes to holding the government responsible to act properly. Do not overspend your whatever has been given. So there is fiscal responsibility as well. The original 1917 legislation was meant to give the Treasury some autonomy over borrowing as well. Prior to 1917, Congress authorized the Treasury to borrow in smaller increments. Smaller increments were there, but there was still some sort of autonomy. Then debt ceiling still serves a useful purpose by creating credible commitment to minimum spending. There is a line that the government has to toe according to this particular debt ceiling, and through this only there is a lot of influence that the opposition has on the government. So that is why it is important. And debt ceiling serves as for a useful purpose. It's not just hue and cry. And this is the reason why the current government might not even talk about completely absolving debt ceiling. So I hope this issue has been cleared out to you, and I will come up with other important segment as well in order to make you ensure that you know international relations well. So thank you so much for watching.